Oh, hey there, class. You just got me putting some grades in on my old Apple IIe. It's not much compared to computers these days, but it's got some pretty cool games on it. You know what? How about we have an impromptu class? I think I know just the game that I'd like to cover. In the mid-19th century, hundreds of thousands of people living in the United States traveled westward across the country. The people who were moving west had various different reasons for emigrating. Some were fur traders, some were missionaries, some were looking to get involved in the California gold rush, and others just sought a new life. There were multiple paths that guided settlers to the west, but the most well-known was the Oregon Trail. The Oregon Trail was a nearly 2,000-mile path stretching from Independence, Missouri to the Willamette Valley in Oregon. It was a very important part of the history of the western expansion of settlers in the U.S., so important that an interactive game that educated schoolchildren about the trail was made over 100 years later. In 1971, Don Rawich, a student teacher in history at a Minneapolis middle school, was tasked with creating an interactive assignment to teach his students about the Oregon Trail. He initially came up with a board game that would deal with what supplies you take to begin with, random events, and so forth, and was set on that idea until telling his roommates about his assignment. His roommates were Bill Heineman and Paul Dillenberger, who both had a background in math and programming. They pitched that the idea would work well as a computer game, since the computer could create the random events better and work to program the game on the school's HP 2100 minicomputer. The HP 2100 was a computer that was connected to a teleprinter. What you typed would end up coming out as paper, meaning that the original 1971 version of the Oregon Trail was entirely text-based. The game was a success as many students thoroughly enjoyed it. They enjoyed it so much that Rawich decided to keep the game by printing out copies of the source code and then deleting the program for the computer when his semester as a student teacher came to an end. 3 years later, Rawich was hired by Minnesota Educational Computing Consortium, or MECC, at an entry-level position. MECC had a higher-end computer system that could be accessed by schools across the entire state of Minnesota and was looking to add more educational content that could be accessed by Minnesota students. When Rawich learned of this, he petitioned to add his game to the mainframe, and after reworking the source code to add in some more realistic updates than he had in the original version, the game was added in 1975. This mainframe version of the Oregon Trail became so popular that MECC realized that they could profit from it. In the early 80s, schools across the country started adopting Apple II computers for educational purposes, so MECC developed a floppy disk version of the game, which added graphical capabilities instead of just being a type-based game, and began to sell them across the country. Across the various versions of the game, it sold 65 million copies. Unfortunately, what that means is that the 5 1/4 inch floppy disk that everyone's familiar with is not the original version of the game, and since the program was taken off the HP 2100 computer, there's no real way to play the original. But the Apple II version is the one that made it famous, so I feel it's just as good. Just keep in mind that even this primitive computer is light years ahead of what the original would be. But enough talk, let's pop this thing in. The game is pretty basic as computer games are concerned. You have options for different commands you can put in to say how you want to progress the game and see how that plays out. To start, you choose who you want to play as. Your options are the banker, the carpenter, and the farmer. The only difference between these options is the banker starts out with more money, the carpenter has less, and the farmer has the least. But in keeping with historical accuracy, the West needed more carpenters and farmers than they did bankers. So beating the game as a carpenter gets you double the points, and beating the game as the farmer gets you triple the points. After that, you name the members of your group and choose what month you want to leave. The month is important because it determines the various effects weather will have on you depending on if it's the summer or the winter. Your journey starts in Independence, Missouri, where you start off buying equipment. The amount of oxen you have determines how fast you go on the trail. Your party needs food and clothing to survive. You may use bullets to hunt, and you can buy extra parts for your wagon in case something breaks. Once that's finished, you're off. Now you have to decide how your party is going to get along. There are 3 different paces you can set your wagon on: steady, strenuous, and grueling. The harder the pace, the faster you travel, but also the worse your party's health ends up being. You also need to set the use of rations for your party between filling, meager, and bare bones. The worse the rationing, the more health risks your party has, but you save food. Both the pace and rations can be changed as you go along. While traveling the trail, you hit a multitude of landmarks. The main ones that you need to deal with are forts, where you can spend money to get more supplies, and rivers that you need to cross. When you get to a river, you have a couple options as well.
You can ford the river, which basically just means walking your wagon through it. You can caulk the wagon shut and float it across, or you can pay a guy to get you to the other side of the river. I say, if you have the money, almost always go for the guide, because if the game randomly decides that you don't make it across the river when you choose to ford or caulk, you lose a lot of supplies. Speaking of random events, there's a lot that are thrown at you that hinder your progress. Oxen can get lost or injured, thieves can come in the middle of the night to steal your supplies, and your party can even suffer broken limbs or diseases such as cholera and dysentery.
And if you don't know what dysentery is, well, you're gonna crap your pants to death whenever I tell you.
Throughout the path, you can also use your bullets to hunt for food, which pulls up a little shooting minigame. But for the sake of at least trying to keep in tune with the original 1971 game, I'm not going to use it. However, the 1971 game did keep hunting in mind, except instead of shooting bullets, you type POW or BANG. If you type the word fast enough, you'd end up getting a certain amount of food, so that's pretty neat. Once you get to Fort Laramie, it's time to flip the disc over and keep going. I should probably mention that when you're at landmarks, it's always a good idea to talk to people. They can give you tips on how to navigate certain parts of the trail, and if you're out of money but have a certain overabundance of supplies, you can always try to trade with people. The last leg of the trip takes you to the Dalles, where when you progress, you either pay a fee to go on the next path, or you float your wagon down a river and play a fun minigame. Unfortunately, I can't show you the minigame because every time I tried to take this path, my game would freeze. But luckily, I chose the banker so we can just buy our way into Oregon. At the end of the game, you reach the Willamette Valley, the finishing line for many 19th century settlers who took this very trail.
The Oregon Trail wasn't just educational, it was also fun and innovative in every iteration of its life. Hopefully you guys learned something today, and I'll see you next time right here on VG 101. But wait, forgot to show you what happens when you die.
If all your party members succumb to illness, you end up with this screen of a gravestone. See? Here lies Elijah.
Wait, I can write my own epitaph too. What should I write? I know.